The air inside the arena crackled with an energy you could almost taste. Thousands of voices, a rumbling wave of excitement, crashed against the rafters of the massive venue. This wasn't just any night, it was a major WWE event in the United States, and the main event was just moments away. The lights pulsed. Music thumped through the floor, and the collective roar of the crowd was a living, breathing thing. Every person there was buzzing, eyes fixed on the entrance ramp, waiting for their heroes or villains to emerge. It was a spectacle, larger than life, and everyone felt like they were a part of something huge. Amidst this thrilling chaos, a woman named Sarah navigated the crowded concourse. She moved with a confidence that turned heads, a quiet elegance in her stylish outfit that set her apart from the sea of fan jerseys and branded merchandise. Her steps were purposeful, her gaze steady, hinting at a subtle importance, a familiarity with these grand stages. You could see the excitement in her eyes, a shared thrill with the crowd, but also a hint of something more, like she knew a secret the others didn't. She wasn't just a spectator. She was connected to this world in a way most people only dreamed of. Her journey towards her special seating area hit a snag at a security checkpoint. A burly guard, his face set in a practiced frown, held out a hand. "Ticket and ID, please, ma'am," he said, his voice flat over the din. Sarah, used to smoother passages, produced her credentials. There was a brief pause, a flicker of confusion on the guard's face as he scanned a barcode, then back at her. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he began, his tone stiffening, "but this doesn't seem to be valid for this section. You'll need to go through the general entrance." Sarah felt a prickle of annoyance. "There must be a mistake," she said, her voice clear and firm. "These are my husband's and mine. We're supposed to be in the VIP section, right by the ramp. I always use these." She tried to show him something on her phone, a confirmation email perhaps, but the guard just shook his head. "Doesn't matter what's on your phone, ma'am. This scanner says no. You can try guest services or the main gate." The interaction, which should have been a quick formality, started to stretch, drawing the attention of other security personnel. Sarah's patience wore thin. She wasn't used to being questioned like this, especially not at an event where she had every right to be. The guard's dismissive attitude felt like a wall, and her attempts to clarify only seemed to harden his stance. Another guard, younger and equally stern, stepped closer, his arms crossed. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly on Sarah. Sarah felt a surge of frustration. The main event was about to start, and she was stuck arguing with people who clearly didn't understand. She needed to get to her seat, her specific, designated seat. "Look," she said, her voice rising slightly, a hint of exasperation creeping in. She gestured towards the arena, the pulsing lights, the noise. "I'm a wrestler. I need to be backstage, or at least in my seats. My husband is in the main event." She said it quickly, a desperate attempt to cut through the red tape, to use a piece of information she thought would clear everything up instantly. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. She was connected to the wrestling world, deeply. She intended it as a shortcut, a way to show them she wasn't just some random fan trying to sneak in. The words hung in the air for a moment. Then the security personnel exchanged glances. A slow, almost imperceptible smirk spread across the face of the younger guard. "A wrestler, huh?" he scoffed, his tone dripping with disbelief. "Right, and I'm the commissioner." The first guard, who had been holding her credentials, now held them out, not returning them, but presenting them almost like evidence. Ma'am, we're going to need you to step aside. You're holding up the line. His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Sarah's heart pounded. This was going all wrong. She tried to explain further, to clarify her statement, but they weren't listening. They had already decided what she was. An unruly fan trying to pull a fast one. The guards moved closer, their bodies forming a subtle barrier, signaling that her passage was denied, and her presence was no longer welcome. The commotion, small at first, began to draw the eyes of those nearby. Whispers started. A few phones were raised, and the electric atmosphere of the arena now had a tiny, unsettling eddy of tension swirling around Sarah. She was being detained, right there, in front of everyone, for a misunderstanding that was quickly spiraling out of control. The security guards had made their decision. They weren't interested in listening to Sarah's explanations anymore. Their eyes, once merely dismissive, now held a hint of suspicion, a hardening that felt unfair and cold. Sarah could feel the stares of the growing crowd around them, a mix of curiosity and judgment. It was like a spotlight had been thrown on her, and she hated it. She hated being the center of this kind of attention. She tried to take a step back, to regain some distance, but the guards subtly blocked her path. Then, she saw them. Two police officers, their uniforms crisp and their faces unsmiling, were making their way through the crowd towards her. They hadn't been there a moment ago, but now they were, moving with purpose. The arena security had clearly called them. Sarah's stomach tightened. This was getting serious, and for what? A simple misunderstanding about a ticket and a quick remark meant to clear things up. Her frustration, which had been simmering, now started to boil over. She couldn't believe this was happening. One of the officers, a tall man with a stern expression, approached her directly. "Ma'am, is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. It wasn't really a question. It was a statement, a demand for her to justify herself. Sarah tried to gather her thoughts, to explain everything clearly, but the words felt jumbled in her head. How could she make them understand? She wasn't some troublemaker. She was here for a show, with her husband, the main event. "There's no problem," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "These guards just don't understand. I'm with one of the wrestlers. My husband is in the main event tonight. I just need to get to my seat. It's VIP." She tried to offer a small, reassuring smile, but the officers' faces remained blank. They looked at her, then at the security guards, who quickly gave their version of events. Sarah could hear snippets. Disruptive fan. Trying to bypass security. Claimed she was a wrestler. The officers listened to the guards, nodding slowly, their eyes occasionally flicking back to Sarah. She could feel their gaze, assessing her, judging her. There was something in their eyes, a subtle shift, that made her uncomfortable. It wasn't just about the rules anymore. It felt like they had already decided what kind of person she was, based on how she looked, how she spoke, and the situation she was in. She was a black woman, assertive, in a public space, challenging authority. She knew, with a sinking feeling, that this was going to be harder than it should be. "So you're claiming you're a wrestler?" the officer asked, his tone flat, laced with disbelief. It was the same tone the security guards had used, mocking and dismissive. Sarah bit back a sharp retort. She knew she had to stay calm, to try and reason with them. "No, not exactly," she clarified, trying to correct her earlier, hurried statement. "I'm married to one. He's the champion. I just meant I'm part of the wrestling world. I have access." She felt a wave of despair. Why was this so hard? Why couldn't they just believe her? The officers exchanged another glance. It was clear they weren't buying it. "Ma'am, we need you to cooperate," the other officer said, stepping slightly closer. Attempting to gain unauthorized access to restricted areas and making false claims is a serious matter. False claims. Sarah felt a surge of anger. She wasn't making anything up. Her husband was probably backstage right now, getting ready, completely unaware that his wife was being treated like a criminal. He was probably focused on his match in his own world, with no idea what was happening just a few feet away. The crowd around them had grown larger now. People were openly staring, some whispering, a few holding up their phones, recording the scene. Sarah felt a blush creep up her neck, a mix of humiliation and pure rage. She could feel the pressure mounting, the eyes on her, the officer's unwavering sternness. She knew she should probably just walk away, go to guest services like the first guard suggested, but something inside her refused to back down. She was right, and they were wrong. She belonged here. "Can I just call him?" she asked, her voice a little softer, a plea rather than a demand. "Or one of the WWE officials. They'll clear this up." She was desperate now, grasping at straws. She knew her husband's phone would be with his manager, or in his locker room, probably on silent, as he prepared. But surely someone could confirm her identity. The officers just shook their heads. "We've heard it all before, ma'am," the first officer said, his voice losing its calm edge, becoming more impatient. "People try all sorts of things to get backstage. We're going to have to ask you to come with us." Sarah's heart pounded even harder. Come with them? Where? This was insane. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She felt trapped. The circle of officers and security closing in. The stares from the crowd felt heavier now, accusatory. She could almost hear their thoughts. "Oh, another one causing trouble." "But I haven't done anything," she protested, her voice cracking slightly. "I just want to watch the show. With my husband." The officers didn't respond with words. Instead, the first officer reached for his belt, his hand going for his handcuffs. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. Handcuffs? For her? She couldn't process it. This was a nightmare. This couldn't be real. "Ma'am, you're being uncooperative," he stated, his voice now entirely devoid of patience. "We're going to have to take you in." Before she could even fully comprehend what was happening, before she could say another word, the officer had her wrist. A cold metallic click echoed faintly in the loud arena as the first cuff snapped shut. Sarah flinched, her body tensing up. It was happening. They were actually handcuffing her. The humiliation washed over her like a tidal wave, hot and stinging. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like it would burst out of her chest. This was wrong. All of it was so wrong. The cold metal bit into her skin as the second cuff clicked into place, sealing her wrists together behind her back. Sarah stood there, frozen, the sound of the crowd around her suddenly seeming to fade into a distant hum. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation, but all she could feel was a burning shame. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was Sarah, the champion's wife, a respected figure in her own right, and now she was being treated like a common criminal in front of thousands. The officers, their faces unreadable, tightened their grip on her arms. The crowd, which had been a low murmur just moments before, now erupted into a cacophony of gasps, whispers, and the unmistakable clicking of phone cameras. She could see flashes going off, recording her moment of public humiliation for anyone to see. Some people pointed, their expressions a mix of curiosity and judgment. Others looked genuinely shocked, a few even appearing sympathetic, but no one stepped forward. No one intervened. She was on her own. The weight of all those eyes, all those silent judgments, pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. Her vision blurred slightly, not from tears, but from the sheer intensity of the moment, the surreal nature of it all. A wave of anger, sharp and potent, cut through the humiliation. How dare they? How dare these officers, these security guards, treat her like this? She hadn't done anything. She had simply tried to get to her seat, to support her husband, and now she was handcuffed, a spectacle for everyone to gawk at. She wanted to scream, to rail against the injustice, to demand they call someone who actually knew her, but the words caught in her throat, replaced by a tight knot of disbelief. She felt utterly helpless, her fate now in the hands of people who refused to believe a single word she said. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper, but laced with a fierce defiance. "My husband is the champion. You're making a huge mistake." She tried to lift her head, to meet their gaze, to show them she wasn't some unruly fan, but her efforts were met with a firm pull on her arm. "Ma'am, we've heard enough," one of the officers said, his tone flat and dismissive. "You're coming with us." They started to move, guiding her through the throngs of people. Every step felt like an eternity. She could feel the eyes following her, the whispers growing louder as they passed. "What did she do? Is that a real wrestler? Looks like she tried to sneak in." The comments, though mostly conjecture, felt like daggers. She kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, refusing to look at anyone, unwilling to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of shame and fury. They led her past concession stands, past merchandise kiosks, through a section of the arena where the seats were still filling up. She was completely exposed, a walking exhibit of what happens when you cross the line. The bright arena lights, usually a sign of excitement and entertainment, now felt harsh and unforgiving, spotlighting her misery. She could only imagine the stories that would start spreading, the rumors that would fly, fueled by these few moments of public shame. Her reputation, her husband's reputation, all of it felt like it was being dragged through the mud. As they approached a less crowded corridor, a faint, familiar melody began to resonate through the arena's sound system. It was a powerful, driving beat, instantly recognizable. Her husband's entrance music. Her head snapped up, a jolt of panic going through her. He was coming out. He was about to make his grand entrance, completely oblivious to the nightmare she was living. The thought of him walking out there, full of adrenaline and focus, while she was being paraded away in handcuffs, twisted her stomach. He would be so confused, so angry, so hurt if he saw her like this. The officers, seemingly oblivious to the significance of the music, continued to steer her towards a side exit, away from the main concourse. They were moving with a purpose, keen to get her out of the public eye now that the initial spectacle was over. But it was too late. The damage was done. The images were out there. The whispers had begun. She could hear the roar of the crowd intensify as her husband's music swelled. He was probably walking down the ramp now, soaking in the cheers, ready to put on a show, and she, his wife, was being escorted away like a common criminal, her pleas ignored, her identity dismissed. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She tried one last time, her voice strained, hoping a shred of humanity might reach them. "Please, just call his manager. He'll tell you who I am. He's about to come out." but her words were met with the same cold indifference. "We're almost there, ma'am," one officer stated, pushing open a heavy, unmarked door. The arena's vibrant energy was instantly muted by the dull, sterile atmosphere of a backstage hallway. The music, which had been so loud just moments before, now sounded distant and muffled. She was being taken further and further away, into the bowels of the building, into a place where her husband's fame, her own identity, seemed to hold no weight at all. The public humiliation might be over for the crowd, but for her, the ordeal was just beginning. The backstage area was a hive of controlled chaos, a labyrinth of corridors and dressing rooms buzzing with activity. Wrestlers warmed up, technicians adjusted equipment, and production staff hurried with clipboards. Far from the main arena floor, in his private dressing room, the champion was in his zone. He stretched, focused, and listened to the distant roar of the crowd, a sound that usually fueled him, but now just served as background noise. He went through his pre-match rituals, adjusting his wristbands, taking deep breaths. His mind was entirely on the upcoming match, the opponent, the strategy. He had no idea his wife was just a few walls away, in a situation that would soon turn his world upside down. Meanwhile, whispers started to make their way through the backstage labyrinth. Fragmented reports, like pieces of a broken puzzle, began circulating among the lower-level staff. "Did you hear about that fan?" One production assistant asked another, barely glancing up from his monitor. "Yeah, some lady trying to sneak in, acting all entitled," came the reply. Security had to call the cops. The details were hazy, distorted by repeated tellings, but the general gist was clear. A disruptive fan, an arrest, a minor incident swiftly dealt with. No one connected it to the champion, or to anyone important for that matter. It was just another Tuesday night incident in a busy arena, easily dismissed. Sarah, still handcuffed, was now in a small windowless room, probably an unused storage closet or a minor security office. The air was stale, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making the already tense situation feel even more sterile and isolating. Her initial surge of public humiliation had given way to a simmering anger, mixed with a desperate need to be heard. She sat on a hard plastic chair, her wrists aching from the cuffs. "Look," she said, her voice strained but firm, addressing the two officers and the security guard, who stood watch over her. "This is ridiculous. I told you, I'm his wife, the champion. He's literally about to go out there. Can you just call his manager, or even just call the WWE office? Someone will confirm who I am." The officers exchanged glances, their faces still set in expressions of polite but unwavering skepticism. "Ma'am, we've heard it all," one officer replied, his tone flat. "Everyone tries to pull something. If you're really who you say you are, why didn't you have proper credentials?" The security guard nodded in agreement, arms crossed. Their belief that Sarah was fabricating her story remained absolute. They had seen countless fans try to bluff their way into restricted areas, and in their minds, Sarah was just another one, perhaps a bit more persistent, but ultimately just another fan trying to game the system. Her claims, to them, sounded increasingly desperate. Rather than truthful, they weren't being malicious. They were simply operating under the assumption that she was lying, an assumption born from experience and perhaps, subtly, from the way she looked and acted, which didn't fit their preconceived notions of a wrestler's wife. At that very moment, the arena exploded. The champion's entrance music, now full volume, reverberated through the entire building. The crowd's roar was deafening. a wave of sound that even penetrated the thick walls of Sarah's makeshift holding cell, though it was still muffled. Every fiber of her being screamed to him, to somehow make him aware of her plight. She could picture him perfectly, striding confidently down the ramp, his signature pose, the flash of cameras. His focus would be absolute, his mind entirely on the performance. He would be completely oblivious that his wife was being held captive just steps away from his grand entrance. The thought was unbearable. As the champion made his way to the ring, a low-level arena staff member, a young woman named Chloe, who usually handled merchandise inventory, was passing by the security office. She paused, hearing the muffled commotion from inside. She had seen Sarah earlier, looking quite elegant, trying to navigate the initial security check. Chloe remembered thinking Sarah looked familiar, almost like she'd seen her in pictures with the champion. She hadn't paid much attention at the time, dismissing it as a passing thought. But now, hearing the raised voices, seeing the officers, and then hearing Sarah's frustrated pleas about being the champion's wife, a tiny seed of doubt began to sprout in Chloe's mind. She knew these officers could be pretty quick to judge, especially with people who didn't look like the usual VIPs. She hesitated, her hand hovering near the door, a flicker of unease crossing her face. Should she say something? Should she ask? But then the champion's entrance music swelled again, signaling the start of his match, and Chloe, feeling like it wasn't her place, reluctantly moved on, the slight unease still lingering in the back of her thoughts. She didn't act on it, not yet, but the seed had been planted. The champion, oblivious to Chloe's brief hesitation, or Sarah's continued detention, was now fully immersed in his match. The roar of the crowd was a familiar symphony, the bright lights a second home. He moved with practiced precision, his body a well-oiled machine, responding to every cue, every attack, every counter. His focus was absolute, a tunnel vision honed by years of training and performance. He landed a powerful suplex, eliciting a massive cheer from the arena. He locked in a submission hold, watching his opponent struggle, his mind calculating the next move. This was his world, his domain, and for these moments nothing else existed. Meanwhile, in a luxury box high above the ring, Marcus, the champion's longtime manager and closest friend, was watching the match with a critical eye. Marcus was more than just a manager. He was family, a strategic partner, and a confidant. He knew the champion better than almost anyone, and he knew Sarah almost as well. His phone buzzed with an incoming text from Chloe, the low-level arena staff member. It was short, cryptic, and sent a jolt of alarm through him. Sarah is being held by security. They think she's a fan. Police involved. Backstage. Marcus stared at the message, his brow furrowing. Sarah? Held by security? Police? It made no sense. Sarah was the champion's wife, a well-known figure within the WWE inner circle, even if she didn't constantly seek the spotlight. He quickly typed a reply to Chloe. Where exactly? Is she okay? His eyes darted from his phone to the ring, where the champion was now delivering a series of powerful punches. The crowd chanting along, Marcus's mind raced. This couldn't be right. Sarah always had her credentials. She knew the drill. Unless something had gone terribly wrong. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He tried calling Sarah's cell, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Still voicemail. A cold dread began to creep in. He knew Sarah was assertive, sometimes impatient, but never disruptive. And the police? That was a serious escalation. Chloe's reply came almost immediately. Near the loading dock entrance, they won't listen to her. She's upset. Marcus didn't wait. He stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over a tray of snacks. "I'll be right back," he mumbled to the other guests in the box, who were too engrossed in the match to notice his sudden departure. He navigated the crowded hallways with a sense of urgency, his mind replaying Chloe's words. He had to confirm this himself. He had to see Sarah. He pulled out his own phone and called one of the senior security managers, a man named Henderson, who he knew personally. Henderson's line was busy. Marcus tried again, his frustration mounting. Back in the ring, the champion felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't anything he could pinpoint, no specific sound or sight, but a feeling, a faint ripple of unease, like a discordant note in a familiar melody. His opponent had just kicked out of a pin, and the match was nearing its climax, but a flicker of distraction crossed his focus. He shook it off, attributing it to fatigue or the pressure of the moment, and went back on the offensive, hitting his signature move. The crowd erupted, a wave of sound that should have drowned out any lingering thoughts, but the feeling persisted, a tiny nagging worry at the edge of his awareness. He didn't know why, but something felt off. Marcus finally got through to Henderson. "Henderson, it's Marcus. What in the hell is going on backstage with Sarah? I just got a text that she's being detained by your people and the police." Henderson's voice on the other end was initially calm, then stammering. "Marcus, I'm not sure. There was an incident with a disruptive fan claiming to be a wrestler, but Sarah, the champion's wife?" The realization hit Henderson like a physical blow. He dismissed the report as another routine fan issue, not bothering to follow up personally. "Oh my God, Marcus, I'll check immediately. Where is she?" Marcus gave him the location near the loading dock. As Henderson barked orders into his radio, Marcus was already sprinting towards the specified area. He rounded a corner and saw her. Sarah, handcuffed, standing between two police officers and a stern-faced arena security guard. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes red, but there was still a defiant set to her jaw. The sight hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He rushed forward, his voice loud and clear. "Sarah, what is going on here?" The officers turned, surprised by his sudden appearance. Marcus, a well-known face in the WWE, immediately commanded a different kind of respect. "She's the champion's wife!" "What are you doing?" Marcus demanded, his voice laced with indignation. Henderson, now on the scene, looked horrified. "Officer, this is Marcus, the champion's manager. And this is indeed Sarah, the champion's wife. There's been a terrible mistake." The police officer's expressions shifted from stern authority to dawning horror. The security guard's face went pale. The reality of their colossal error slammed into them. This wasn't just a fan. This was the wife of one of the biggest stars in their company, a woman who should have been treated with the utmost respect. The enormity of their misjudgment, the potential fallout, began to sink in. They had completely misread the situation, dismissing her identity because she didn't fit their narrow expectations. Back in the ring, the champion had just delivered the final, devastating blow. The referee counted to 3. The bell rang. His arm was raised in victory. The crowd cheered, but the subtle unease he'd felt earlier intensified. He quickly grabbed his championship belt, acknowledging the crowd with a quick nod, but his eyes were scanning the entrance ramp, something he rarely did right after a match. He felt an urgent pull, a need to get backstage, a premonition that something was wrong. He didn't know what, but he knew he needed to find out. He exited the ring, the cheers of the crowd still washing over him, but his mind was already elsewhere. a growing sense of dread building with every step he took towards the backstage area. The news was about to hit him. The champion's rage, a palpable force, erupted the moment he heard Marcus's frantic explanation. He didn't even wait for the full story. The arena noise, the lingering adrenaline from his match, all faded into a dull background hum. All he could see was Sarah, handcuffed, her face a mixture of relief and profound humiliation. His jaw tightened, a vein pulsed in his neck, and his eyes, usually blazing with a determined focus, now burned with an inferno of protective fury. He wasn't just a wrestler anymore. He was a husband whose wife had been wronged. He moved with a speed that startled even Marcus. His exit from the ring had been swift, a blur of motion. Now, backstage, he was a man possessed, his every step a testament to his anger and concern. He pushed past bewildered stagehands, ignored the calls of trainers, and brushed off a public relations person trying to congratulate him on his win. His focus was singular, absolute. Find Sarah and confront those responsible. The corridor was a maze of concrete and shadowed corners, but Marcus, now running to keep up, pointed the way. "This way, near the loading dock, just past the catering area." The champion burst through a heavy double door, and there she was, Sarah, still in the same spot, the handcuffs glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. The two police officers stood awkwardly, their faces now etched with a clear understanding of their monumental blunder. The arena security guard, a large man, who had seemed so confident moments before, now looked like a wilting plant. The champion's entrance was like a thunderclap. His voice, usually reserved for the roar of the crowd or intense in-ring promos, boomed through the quiet hallway, cutting through the tension like a knife. "What in God's name is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes locking onto the officers. "Why is my wife in handcuffs?" The officers, caught completely off guard by his raw intensity, stammered. One, a younger man, started to explain. "Sir, there was a report of a disruptive fan. She claimed to be a wrestler." He trailed off, his voice losing conviction as he met the champion's furious gaze. The champion didn't let him finish. "She is a wrestler. She's my wife. And you treated her like a common criminal." His voice was low now, a dangerous rumble that vibrated through the air. "Do you have any idea who she is? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Henderson, having finally caught up, stepped forward, his face a picture of apologetic distress. "Officers, I assure you, this is a grave misunderstanding. This is Sarah, the champion's wife. She has full credentials. She was simply trying to get to her husband." The officers, confronted by the champion himself, the very embodiment of the event they were supposed to be protecting, slowly began to grasp the magnitude of their error. Their initial disbelief, the stubborn adherence to their protocol, crumbled under the weight of his presence and Henderson's confirmation. The younger officer's face went from pale to a sickly green. The older officer, who had seemed so unyielding, now looked utterly deflated. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. They had not just made a mistake. They had made a public, highly visible, and potentially career-ending mistake involving one of the biggest names in sports entertainment. The racial bias that had subtly guided their initial judgment now glared back at them, a stark and ugly truth. Sarah, who had been holding back her emotions with an iron will, finally allowed herself to break. Seeing her husband, safe and furious on her behalf, was too much. A sob escaped her, and then another. Her defiance, which had been her shield, dissolved into raw, painful emotion. It was a mixture of immense relief that he was there, a deep-seated anger at the injustice, and the profound hurt of being treated with such blatant disregard. She reached out a trembling hand, still bound by the cold metal. The champion, seeing her tears, felt his anger sharpen, but his focus shifted instantly to her comfort. He knelt down, his powerful frame momentarily dwarfed by the gesture, and gently took her handcuffed hands in his. "It's okay, baby. I'm here now. It's going to be okay." The officers, spurred by the champion's protective stance and Sarah's visible distress, finally moved. "Officer, release her," the older one mumbled, his voice barely audible. The younger officer fumbled with the key, his hands shaking slightly. The click of the handcuffs unlocking was a small sound, but it echoed loudly in the tense silence. Sarah immediately pulled her hands free, rubbing her wrists, the red marks already visible on her skin. "We are so incredibly sorry, ma'am," the older officer began, his voice laced with genuine remorse. "We truly had no idea. We were just following procedure, and we made a terrible error in judgment." The security guard also started to apologize, his words tumbling over each other, in his haste to distance himself from the debacle. They were profusely apologizing, their faces contorted with regret and fear of repercussions. The immediate release was a desperate attempt to rectify an unpardonable wrong, but the damage had already been done. The humiliation, the fear, the anger Sarah felt wouldn't simply vanish with the removal of the cuffs. This was far from over. The immediate fallout backstage was a chaotic mess of hushed whispers, frantic phone calls, and palpable tension. WWE officials, who had been alerted to the champion's sudden and furious exit from the ring, now converged on the scene. They found the champion still cradling Sarah, who was wiping away tears, her face streaked with mascara, her wrists red and raw. The two officers and the arena security guard stood a few feet away, looking like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar, their faces pale, and their apologies still tumbling out, though now mostly ignored. A high-ranking WWE executive, a woman named Vanessa, known for her calm demeanor under pressure, stepped forward. Her expression was a mix of concern for Sarah and thinly veiled fury at the officers. "What in the world happened here?" she demanded, her voice low but cutting through the noise. The older officer, still visibly shaken, stammered out an explanation, detailing their perception of Sarah as an unruly fan, her claim of being a wrestler, and their subsequent decision to handcuff her. He omitted, of course, any mention of the racial bias that had clearly colored their judgment, instead focusing on procedure and miscommunication. The champion, however, wasn't letting that slide. He looked up, his eyes blazing. "Procedure? You call treating my wife like a criminal, humiliating her in front of thousands of people, and ignoring every single thing she said, procedure? She told you who she was. She told you she had credentials. You didn't listen. You didn't care. You just saw a black woman alone and decided she was a problem." His words hung heavy in the air, undeniable and deeply uncomfortable for everyone present. Sarah, though still trembling, found her voice. She pulled away from her husband slightly, looking directly at the officers. "You kept asking me for ID, but when I tried to tell you who I was, you just kept cutting me off. You didn't even give me a chance. You just assumed the worst, the way you looked at me. It was like I didn't belong here, like I was trying to sneak in." Her voice was quieter than her husband's, but her words carried a sharp sting of truth. The officers, faced with the champion's direct accusation and Sarah's raw honesty, finally dropped their pretense of simply following protocol. The older officer swallowed hard. "Ma'am, Mr. Champion, I understand why you feel that way. And you're right. We should have listened. We should have verified. There was a clear failure on our part to properly assess the situation. We relied too much on assumptions." He paused, then added, his voice barely a whisper, "And yes, perhaps our own biases played a role. For that, I am truly, deeply sorry. It was wrong. What we did was completely wrong." The younger officer simply nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet Sarah's gaze. Vanessa, the WWE executive, stepped in, her tone firm but measured. "Gentlemen, this is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. We have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior, and for any hint of racial profiling. You have gravely mishandled this situation, and you have caused immense distress to one of our most valued members, and to our champion. This will not stand." She then turned her attention to Sarah and the champion. "Sarah, champion, I cannot express how sorry we are that this happened to you. This is not how we treat our talent, or their families. Rest assured, we will take immediate and decisive action. This incident will be thoroughly investigated, and there will be consequences." She immediately began making calls, talking to arena management, local police command, and WWE's legal team. The air was thick with the weight of damage control. Vanessa assured the couple that WWE would cooperate fully with any actions they wished to take, and that the organization would ensure their well-being moving forward. She spoke about sensitivity training, about revising protocols for identifying authorized personnel, and about a comprehensive review of all security procedures to prevent such an incident from ever happening again. It was clear that the company was reeling and scrambling to mitigate the fallout. Amidst the official apologies and promises of action, the champion held Sarah close, gently stroking her hair. He knew the apologies were necessary, and the changes promised were important, but they didn't erase the experience. Sarah, though accepting the apologies, looked exhausted. Her initial anger was giving way to a profound sadness. "It's not just about the handcuffs," she murmured, her voice muffled against his chest. "It's about feeling like you're not seen, like you're automatically suspicious just because of how you look." The champion nodded, understanding every word. He looked at Vanessa. "We need to make a statement," he said, his voice calmer now, but still resolute. "A public one. Not just for us, but for everyone who's ever been treated this way." Vanessa agreed without hesitation. "Absolutely. We'll work with you on it. We want to be transparent and address this head-on." Later, in the quiet of their private locker room, the champion continued to provide comfort and reassurance. He helped Sarah clean her face, gently massaged her wrists, and just held her. He kept repeating, "You're safe now. You're with me. We'll get through this together." He emphasized their unity, their shared resolve. This ordeal, while horrific, had brought them even closer, solidifying their commitment to each other and to fighting for what was right. He knew this wasn't just a personal incident anymore. It was something that needed to be addressed on a much larger scale, and he was ready to stand by his wife every step of the way. The night was far from over, but in his arms, Sarah felt a flicker of hope that perhaps, from this terrible experience, some good could eventually come. The public statement came out 2 days later, a joint effort from WWE, the local police department, and a carefully worded message from Sarah and the champion themselves. It acknowledged the incident at the arena, stating clearly that an unfortunate misunderstanding had led to Sarah being detained and handcuffed. The police department expressed deep regret for the lapse in judgment by its officers and confirmed an internal review was underway. WWE's statement was even stronger, reiterating their commitment to diversity and inclusion and condemning any form of discrimination or profiling. They apologized unreservedly to Sarah and the champion, promising to implement stricter training and protocols for all event personnel. Sarah and the champion's message was personal and powerful. They spoke about the pain of being judged based on appearance, the humiliation of public detention, and their hope that this incident could spark a wider conversation about ingrained biases. The media coverage was immediate and extensive. National news outlets picked up the story, not just in sports sections but on primetime news segments. Social media exploded with discussions, some supportive, many sharing similar experiences of racial profiling, and a few still skeptical or critical of Sarah. Pundits debated the role of race in everyday interactions, the power dynamics between authority figures and the public, and the responsibility of large organizations like WWE to ensure the safety and dignity of all individuals, especially their own talent and their families. The incident became a flashpoint, forcing many to confront uncomfortable truths about how assumptions can lead to injustice. It was clear this wasn't just a one-day story. It had legs, and it was sparking conversations far beyond the wrestling world. As promised, disciplinary actions were swift and firm. The two officers directly involved in handcuffing Sarah were suspended without pay pending a full investigation, which later resulted in one officer being demoted and the other transferred to a non-public facing role, along with mandatory sensitivity training for both. The head of arena security, who had initially dismissed Sarah's claims, was replaced. WWE also announced a new mandatory training program for all event staff, focusing on de-escalation techniques, cultural sensitivity, and clear procedures for verifying the identity of talent and their associates. They also implemented a direct hotline for talent and their families to report issues immediately, bypassing layers of security if necessary. These were not just token gestures. They were systemic changes designed to prevent such a debacle from ever happening again. Sarah, initially overwhelmed by the attention, found her voice growing stronger with each passing day. She was no longer just the champion's wife. She was Sarah, a woman who had experienced injustice and was now determined to speak out. She accepted invitations to speak at community events, joined panels discussing racial bias, and partnered with civil rights organizations. Her story, raw and relatable, resonated with countless people. She shared the fear, the anger, and the embarrassment, but also her resolve to turn a negative experience into a positive force for change. She emphasized that her story was just one of many, and that countless others experienced similar or worse treatment without a platform to be heard. She used her newfound visibility to amplify those unheard voices, making it clear that her fight was for broader justice, not just personal vindication. Throughout this public journey, the champion stood firmly by her side. He attended every event, every interview, his presence a powerful symbol of solidarity. He used his immense platform, both within WWE and through his personal social media, to amplify Sarah's message. During his promos, he subtly wove in themes of respect, fairness, and standing up for what's right, without turning his character into a preachy activist. His fans, who adored him for his in-ring prowess, now admired him even more for his unwavering support of his wife and his commitment to social justice. He understood that his influence could help ensure the incident served as a catalyst for positive change, not just a fleeting controversy. He made it clear that he was not just her husband, but her partner in this fight, and he would use every ounce of his power to support her. The ordeal, though deeply painful and publicly humiliating, ultimately strengthened Sarah and the champion's bond in ways they hadn't imagined. They navigated the storm of media attention, public scrutiny, and personal trauma together. They spent countless hours talking, processing, and comforting each other. The experience solidified their resilience and commitment to each other, proving that their relationship could withstand even the most unexpected and challenging pressures. They emerged from it, not just as a couple, but as a united front, their love deepened by shared adversity and their shared purpose. They understood each other on a new level, having faced a profound challenge that tested their trust and their values. The lasting impact of the incident was a somber reminder of ingrained biases that still exist in society, often surfacing in unexpected ways. It served as a powerful lesson for WWE, for law enforcement, and for the public at large, highlighting the need for constant vigilance against prejudice and the importance of empathy and respect. But it was also a story of rectifying wrongs, of accountability, and of fostering greater understanding. Sarah and the champion, through their courage and their conviction, transformed a moment of humiliation into a movement for change. Their story became a testament to the fact that even in the face of injustice, a strong voice, supported by love and conviction, can indeed make a difference, leaving a lasting mark on the community and within the entertainment world. It was a difficult journey, but one that ultimately promised a more just and aware future.